But let's get started and see if he arrives. My name is Lina Soni, and I work as a fellow with ORF, focusing on innovation policy and technology policy. With me here on the stage, we have, which side do we start? We start over here. Amy Mashelka from Reliance GeoGenNext, a platform that catalyzes startups. Then we have Vishal Kanvati, who's Senior VP Products and Innovation for National Payments Corporation of India, and Amit Shah, who is Chief FinTech Officer at Yes Bank. So I wanted to start, given the policy presentation we had just now, and that the government isn't here to defend their policy. I wanted to start by asking each of you in turn, it's a great vision that the Government of Maharashtra has. But given, where are we now? The way, from your perspective, where are we now? What are the big gaps in the ecosystem for fintech right now, and will this policy address it? So, Amit, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So, actually, to be honest, I've not had a chance to go through the entire policy in detail. But I'll give you my own perspective, my own story. 5 years back, I tried to create a startup in fintech, and we came out with a mobile POS product, which typically was useful for or at least we assume that it will be useful for a small retailer to accept payments, digital payments, and this was 5 years back. And essentially that product used a protocol which is called Bluetooth. At that point in time, 4.0 had just been released. And we created a prototype, and the prototype was working well with Android phones. And we started thinking that, how do we validate this product from a regulatory standpoint? Because we didn't know whether what we were doing was legal, right? So we took a trip to Mumbai, and thanks to my one of my relatives' connections here in RBI, we were given VIP access to the RBI building, which was itself an incredible experience. And we went up and we were given a meeting with the Director of Payments and Settlements. And he looked at it and he said, very good idea, and he encouraged us. But then, there was no direction beyond that in terms of who should we talk to, and, how should we approach this whole subject. Right, and is this legal, is this not legal, can we do it, can we not do it? And with all humility, Vishal, we were also pointed to NPCI, but for us, NPCI was a very big organization and we didn't know who to approach out there. So one of the things is that I would like to say is that, it's not about policies. It's about how do you make policy accessible through its people. And, with NPCI leading the way and with other policy makers leading the way, I think it'll be nice to have some kind of boot camps regularly in the ecosystem where, because in fintech, apart from your technology, your product, your market, your execution risk, your scale-up risk, there is also a regulatory risk. And there are not enough advisors on the regulatory risk side. So I think that is something that I would definitely encourage the government to look at, and also the industry to look at, also the accelerators in their own way to kind of bring that in.
I would just want to add, Amay, that's a very, very important point, right? Even larger organizations, banks themselves are quite often wondering whether what you're doing is on which side of the regulation, right? Because these are not straightforward, and interpretations and the way one bank would execute a particular regulation vis-a-vis somebody else is always going to be debatable. And every time a new policy comes, there's always going to be a little bit of a gray area, right? UPI is a case in point. Interoperability of UPI apps was a very important case in point, right? It almost took a couple of months to get all the banks on the same side of the equation. Next, the trade-offs of various banks and various fintechs would be very different, right? So what a particular fintech wants and what a particular bank wants will be very different again, right? Depending on which side of the equation they are seated on. In fact, I met the fintech officer that Kaustubh was mentioning only day before yesterday. She was at her office, and I mentioned to her exactly the same point. I said there are so many very experienced but retired, regulatory people, right? Why don't you just take their services and keep a, Monday musing kind of a thing where they come, they discuss a product, right? And their word is not final. but at least it gives you a direction, right? It can be a net practice before you go into the major leagues. Having said that, one more point I think that is important, and I worked very closely with Kaustubh when this policy was being put together, is that we did a survey called India Fintech Opportunities Review, where we spoke to around 680 odd fintechs in India and globally, and to understand what are the opportunities and challenges. And this was a key input that went into the policy eventually, is that most fintechs struggle to get a proof of concept, right? And it's a chicken and egg. Till you don't have a proof of concept, you don't get revenues, you don't get valuations, you don't get investments. And 75% of fintechs said that, look, our bootstrap funds are not enough for us to survive. So if you can give us proof of concept funding, some form of matching funding, which Singapore does for that matter, or Israel does to a certain extent, that will be really helpful. So apart from the policy, I think one of the major things that, because they have budgetary allocation as well, is to create a small portion which is like a proof of concept funding, could be structured in a way so it doesn't get abused. But I think that will go a real long way in helping some of the fintechs come up from their MVP stage to actual product implementation.
I think this will address a long tail problem also, right? So a lot of startups today are at a progressive stage, but if you actually want to make this at a scale, I think you need to address the early stage startups, and for them, I think this is a very, very critical problem. I mean, I've experienced this myself, being a startup. Bang on that, Amit. I think just on that point you have raised, I think we are working on something very similar. So, a regulator sandbox per payments is something that is being work in progress. But I think we need a more holistic approach to this. I think the regulator sandbox is mostly around UPI, the payments part of it. But can I do KYC on that? Can I get all the APIs in one box? I think that would be the true solution that we can actually propose to for all the startups. I think that would be the real fantastic thing, which Singapore is already working on it. I think we can take the similar lessons and make it happen here.
So here we talk, what we're talking about is very startup focused, right?
Yes.
What about your banks, big corporates? What's their role in innovating in fintech? Do you see fintech being driven by startups going forward, or what's the role of corporates and the bigger organizations?
There's a very old saying, right, that necessity is the mother of all invention. Unfortunately, over the last few years, we seem to have forgotten that after the whole fintech euphoria started. Today, what is happening is you are searching for a problem after you see a fintech. I mean, you can't get far off from the way you should do things. The way to do it is to ask yourself, what are the areas that I want to transform, right? Because it will change customer service or security or my operational efficiency, etc., etc. And am I better off solving this problem on my own, or do I need a partner? Now, this partner could be an enterprise solution, or this partner could be a fintech, or this partner could be anybody, right? There's no glamour in partnering with a fintech. There are certain solutions that I want to solve only with an enterprise solution, right? Even if there is an equivalent, cheaper, faster fintech available. And then there are other solutions that I would much rather go with a fintech because of the agility that they provide and so on and so forth. And I'll give an example. We were one of the first banks to do a commercial implementation of blockchain for supply chain, right? So what did we say? We said we'll go with Hyperledger, right? Because IBM is supporting that and it's an enterprise grade blockchain framework. But to develop the smart contract on top of that, I will catch hold of fintechs. And we actually went to a bunch of guys who had just started off from IIT Bombay. And we said, can you help us with the smart contracting? Because I need agility there and I need to, I can scale it up much faster than, employing some larger IT services company. So I think it's the best of breed that one has to look at. And most importantly, ask yourself, what am I trying to do? What problem am I trying to solve doing all of this nice stuff?
You're not going down the ICICI route of starting your own in-house innovation lab.
We have a very interesting accelerator. In the first cohort that we launched, we had 750 fintechs from 18 countries applying to us, and we were mind-boggling kind of response. We were wondering why so many people are applying to us, right? One, naturally that they saw us as a progressive organization which had a cultural mindset of a startup. and also the fact that we have one of the most diverse set of APIs which help fintechs partner with us. But I think it also had to do with the India phenomenon, right? They saw us as a beachhead for Indian market, right? So I think it's a mix of both. And then we went on to graduate 10 of those startups. 6 of them we have a commercial agreement with. We launched the second cohort, which was again equally successful with 7, 8 odd startups that we are commercializing. So all of that is happening. But the moot point is, and then you learn over a period of time that, look, solve existing problems. Don't search for problems, right? We did that. We made that mistake in first cohort where we found somebody extremely interesting and then we went around shopping inside in various departments saying, will you take him, right? Which I don't think is the right thing to do unless you really believe that there is a moonshot here and just assisting and working with this fintech will lead to something eventually, right? I mean, you can always bet on a few moonshots also, but I would say that 80% of your effort should be to solve existing large, hairy problems. Opportunities.
What about? You are supporting startups and innovation within a very large corporate that is also innovating rapidly. How do you see? What's intra-innovation and what is sort of supporting external innovations through startups?
Yeah, first of all, I think the work that Amit is doing is very interesting because I think you guys are one of the early ones who started focusing on a certain vertical and started sort of getting startups in that space, and that's how you are also able to build a lot of traction. In our case, we are a conglomerate, and a conglomerate, spanned across hydrocarbons, retail, telecom, digital services now. So, for us, we used to basically open it out to everyone and then let startups apply across categories and then look at, which ones are kind of connecting to some of our business unit needs. So typically the way we look at it now is that, and as Amit was also saying, that there is a there is a build, there is a buy, there is an invest, and there is an acquire strategy that a corporate typically deploys. So first you try to build it yourself, like you were saying. Then if you're not able to build it within a stipulated time and there is a certain urgency, then you buy it. If you're not able to buy it at the price that you want to buy it, then you find a startup to either acquire or to invest. So typically that is how the paradigm is in large corporates. What we are trying to say is that, you can actually look at the buy, the invest and the acquisition at the same time, okay, within a short period of time and in your vertical, provided there is a certain very defined business need. Okay, and business need is very important because otherwise you just end up getting a startup and then they hang around in your campus and there is no outcome. We've had those kind of cases also, and we've had cases where, commercial agreements have happened, investments have happened, acquisitions have happened. So you have to be open to everything, but you have to go with a certain business need in mind, and you have to work around these 4 categories. You have to look at, how to, buy it, how to invest, and how to acquire.
Vishal, you've been both an entrepreneur and then now in the last couple of years working for the NPCI. What's your, how do you work with startups, or do you work with startups, or what's your sort of, and when you were in the payment space as an entrepreneur, would you work with bigger corporates then and banks, or would you go it alone?
Yeah, so at NPCI we are working with a lot of startups, and we have taken 2 approaches. One is, the problems that we want to solve internally. Is there a better solution available in the market? And that's what we are targeting when we are trying to work with startups. The other phenomenon where we are working is startups who can help us grow the digital volume, right? People convert or make us a less cash economy. So I think those are the 2 approaches that we are taking, where we want to encourage startups who can focus on, let's say, one vertical, solve that problem. Payments is just the end product of it, right? But we need to solve problems which are, very, very specific to that vertical. So we are trying to work with those startups. And as a entrepreneur myself, I think, I think getting the right connect, where I'm able to solve a problem for that entity or a problem, getting the business validation is what I think we need to look for. I think that's that's a critical game changer for any startup. If you're able to spot that, I think you would be, most of the time successful in the venture.
Thank you. So we touched on the idea of innovation and supporting ideas. And we talked about gaps in the ecosystem. But if you really want to strengthen the Mumbai's fintech ecosystem and create this hub in the next 5 years, a global hub, what does that take in terms of solution? What is it that we're lacking now that we need to have? What are the sort of solutions we need to have? Is it, so we've had, we need better conversations between regulations and what is going on between government and the industry, for example. Do we need 10 more incubators? Do we need more accelerators? Do we need more funds? What is it we're lacking here, and what are the things that need to plug the ecosystem to make it really strong?
I think we need, if you need to do this startup at scale and at the numbers that we are talking of 10 trillion, I think we need a mechanism where, we can fail early. I think it's very important, and it's not a bad thing to fail early. I think it's very important to do that, maybe at a, even at a graduate, if we can build something and say it's not, that validation is very, very important, and that the early validation is very critical to a startup. I think that if we can create a, automated way of that happening, where industry can give the feedback, we know that this problem is solvable and this is the right approach to solve it. I think if we can create a mechanism around that, I think that would be a huge boost. I think the rest of things will follow, the funding and, other things, infrastructure, everything will follow. But I think, for me, I think that's very critical. The early stage validation of a problem, of the opportunity, sizing the opportunity. I think those are the critical things.
I think I want to pick on what Dr. Saran mentioned in his remarks, that fintech by itself is not the end game, right? It's an enabler. It's the real economy, right? So whether it is agriculture, logistics, manufacturing, whatever it is, right? That is where your real economic growth happens, and fintech is just an enabler, like banking was, fintech can be that. So how do you really provide not just a multiplier, but like a major turbo booster to the entire fintech ecosystem is by, this is my pet topic, open government data, right? Today, why do fintechs want to partner with banks? Because banks are sitting on customer and customer data, right? But that's minuscule when you compare with the amount of data that is organically getting collected by the government on a day-to-day basis. It's humongous. The problem is some of it is not digitized, and what is digitized is only uploaded on the open government, opendata.gov after it is absolutely useless. Okay, so they make it certain that nobody can use this data. And this is in one of our recent committee meetings with the government, one of them said that, right? And I found his humor very interesting, that he actually said that we are certain that whatever we upload cannot be used. And it's stuck in my mind. And I actually analyzed the opengovernment.gov, opendata.gov website, right? It's phenomenal. There are over 1 lakh data sets uploaded. Few thousand APIs created. Most of this data is in readable and executable format, right? So it's not that we're not doing it. It's just that we haven't viewed this holistically, right? So you may have data of, let's say, some pulses grown in certain district over the last 15 years, but nothing before that or after that. Because data stream by itself is not enough. If you give that data with soil health data, with MSP data, with something else, and you club all of this together, it becomes very interesting for somebody to build an app on, right? So if we were to, and we actually wrote a paper on this with MIT, on how to use the data that government has, and we benchmarked what Australia is doing and what UK is doing and what many other countries are doing. I think that itself can be a real booster. And we've been speaking with the Government of Maharashtra as well, that let's say for Nashik as a agri hub, or Nagpur as a logistics hub, or Aurangabad as a MSME hub, or Pune, Chinchwad, whatever as a smart city, can we pick up these 4 cities or these 4 as pilots, where one government department should open up some data that they are in access of, either as APIs or just as data files, and allow a bunch of startups, fintech or otherwise, to come and build solutions on top of that. I think that is the role that the government has to do. Let the startups, let the entrepreneurs, let them figure it out. I mean, they can do it. They don't need anything beyond just basic necessities. And I think that will be a winning combination.
So, and to your question of, whether we need more incubators and accelerators. So, one of the first principles of any vibrant startup ecosystem is that, there need to be exits of startups. That is very, very important. If there are exits, then people make money. If people make money and they've, played that game themselves, then they are able to invest in startups, and that's how the sort of ecosystem grows from there. And one of the reasons why accelerators is a very Western concept. I mean, it started in Silicon Valley, I guess. I don't know where it started, but perhaps in Silicon Valley. And they started it with the sole objective that you could actually bring in a startup without any recommendation. That startup could apply to a program. They would be vetted on merit. And if they pass that vetting, then they would be inducted into the accelerator program. That same concept we have adopted, which is good because now we are also able to take startups without any recommendation. But having said that, unless you have exits and rise of exits, it's not possible to build an ecosystem. That's number one. Number two, specifically within fintech, if you look at what's happening in the whole SME lending space, right? The figure is that there is a $300 billion shortfall of lending in the unorganized SME space. $300 billion, can you imagine? And the top 4 players, the NBFCs, the digital lending NBFCs, have captured just over 1% of that market. So imagine how much one has to go beyond this, right? But these are consumer or business facing service businesses which have to grow very, very fast. The fintechs, as Amit was saying, are enablers. And these fintechs have to be acquired by these aggressively moving, fast moving players, okay, so that one can capture that entire market. So typically that is how one would be able to build that ecosystem. There have to be these fintechs who are working on, artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain. They are enabling these fast moving, let's say NBFCs, who can then pace ahead in the market. So that is how typically the whole ecosystem will grow. And these fintechs can come out of accelerators, they can come out of incubators, wherever. But unless, that forward path is very clear, it's very difficult to move that ecosystem in the right direction.
And are you seeing a lot of fintechs coming up? Do you see a lot of action, your pipeline, so to speak? We have 2 accelerators sitting here, former entrepreneur in the middle. Are you seeing a lot of things emerging, or is it more hope than reality?
Should I be honest? See, there's too much froth. Okay, you have a bunch of, if you were to list down, there are a bunch of, let's say 50 fintechs who move accelerator to accelerator. Okay, this is a reality. Almost every fintech that you meet is a 3rd time accelerator pass out, right? So you wonder sometimes, is he a bad student? Why does he need 3 MBAs, for example, right? I mean, so there is an issue that there are some good fintechs, but, it's not deep enough, right? Why do we only have one Paytm, for example? I mean, brilliant example, brilliant whatever, right? Huge growth, everything else. But why is it only one? Where is the, 2nd, 3rd or 4th? When we talk of all these numbers of amount of money that's come into fintechs, if you remove the top 3, nobody gets any money, right? And it's the same guys getting more and more money, right? I'm not commenting on whether they should get, not get, etc. etc. I'm just saying that beyond the 3rd, it's worse. It's not even Pareto's principle, right? It's 99 and whatever, 1%. I think we need to build that depth. And that depth will come from what Amay was saying in a way is through partnerships, right? Alliances and relationships through underlying technology. This is a term we use in our bank called ART of banking. Don't do everything on your own. Alliance and relationships through underlying technology. I think that will fuel the growth. There is a company, fintech, which has a solution, etc., but it needs to partner with a larger organization so that both of them can, scale up faster. I think that there is an issue there. There are totally 1,400 fintechs in India as far as the traction websites statistics go, and 100 odd fall off, 100 odd come every once in a while, right? Which is a very small ecosystem. It's not deep at all. And within this, the serious players or at least the notable names would be like 100 max.
Yeah, so I think, fintech is one of the focus areas that we have, especially now with the payment bank, that focus is going to increase more and more. Also, our new commerce plans that have been announced at the RL AGM will also look at working with a lot of fintech companies going forward. And hopefully all this will help in giving rise to new partners, new vendors who provide innovative solutions and services. Frankly speaking, there is no silver bullet for creating new fintech startups. There has to be a combination of people who can build technology, people who can sell that technology, and people who understand the market in which that technology is being built. To get that combination of being able to build, being able to sell, and having an understanding of the market itself is a very difficult thing, right? So executives working with banks, with NBFCs, with other financial services institutions have to step up and say that, I want to create a startup, and today that ecosystem exists, and Mumbai is a great place to start. And with the new fintech policy, one can see that, we are headed in the right direction. So more encouragement for people with experience to start their own startups. I think that's the key thing out here.
And do we have enough people? Is there enough talent with the kind of skills we need? And Vishal, having come from Bangalore, how would you compare the space here and in Bangalore? Are there enough people with the skills?
I think the level of expertise, especially if you talk about the new technologies like blockchain and AI, I think we have a long way to go. I think that's a very, very honest answer. I think we have people who are keen, are doing some courses, but I think that expertise to get to a level where we can match up to Israel or any of these countries is quite far ahead. So I think a lot of work needs to be done on that front.
See, the other danger is that, if you look at just the B2B and the B2B2C segment, right? I know a lot of startups who get frustrated and flip their company to the US. They are able to achieve a product market fit in India because fundamentally we are advanced as far as adoption of technology is concerned, as advanced as the US, perhaps more in some categories. They are able to achieve their product market fit very cheaply in India, and then they flip to the US because US is a bigger market. So we will actually lose talent to other markets which are faster growing unless we do something about it. And that is where, all the policy work that we're doing and all the great work that Amit and Vishal are doing, I think that's going to come into play.
And do you think we'll be able to stem that flow, Amit?
See, like Amit said, technology is geography agnostic, right? So if I can create a solution to work at 1 cent per transaction here, and if I'm able to charge 10 cents or $1 in US, then it's very easy, right? I just need one client with a sizable kind of volume to get going. The reverse is also true, right? Which is if you have a cutting edge cyber security solution coming out of Israel, and if those guys are able to go, so we worked with a few of them, they can't think in unit economics like we do, right? But if they break their mental barrier and they decide that India is a big market, they'll wipe out any cyber security company in India like clean, right? Because they are like fairly advanced. And the people, who are behind those companies are very, very advanced in the stuff they do, right? With multiple PhDs and patents and so on and so forth. What we have noticed is that most of our fintechs here, and I'm not trying to belittle our efforts, entrepreneurship here, but are not very deep solutions. They're not very deep tech solutions, right? And whoever has created some interesting solutions, they tell us that the core part of it, they collaborate with somebody sitting out of Poland or Russia or Israel or anywhere else, right? So I think we really need to work on getting this talent equation right. And, if Mumbai wants to be a fintech hub, and it should be, or any other part of the country for that matter, getting this talent equation going is very important. So the first thing that I think Chandrababu Naidu did in Vizag Fintech Valley was start a couple of colleges, right? Whether are they producing the real top end talent or not, but at least it's a very good step in that direction, right? A lot of fintech related talent is coming out of those universities, which will hopefully then co-opt Vizag or Andhra Pradesh as a place to start working, right? So I think talent is, goes without saying, extremely important.
We need to shake up Mumbai University.
The solution will not lie. We cannot solve new age problems with old age methods, right? So this whole university concept by itself is good for a certain problem, right? Which is basic education, basic higher education, and so on and so forth. But specialized skills, why do I need a university? You know, why can't I just hook on to Coursera or edX or anything else, right? I mean, we can find various ways to train our people affordably.
Okay, so I think last question before we open up for questions. Inclusion. How do we make the fintech space inclusive in terms of producing solutions? How do we make the fintech space inclusive of women, minorities, range of education, and how do we make products that are inclusive of different levels of society? Silence.
We will nominate Vishal to answer this.
Sorry, I don't have the answer to the first one. I think it's too early to think about inclusion of whatever you mentioned on the fintech. But I think, frankly, on the inclusion on the product front, I know India is, we have too many challenges and the problem it scales, right? So there is real problem which traditional ways have not been able to solve, and I think that's where fintechs need to step up. I mean, there's a great opportunity. I don't have any doubts on that. It's just that is the fintech able to identify that, and does he have the ability to execute them? I think those are the two critical things to make that happen. And we have seen some good examples. I think you mentioned about Paytm, but something like mutual fund on Paytm is a great example. 100 rupees, no other bank has ever thought about it, right? So we need radical ideas like that to make this opportunity, and this can scale up to every nook and corner of the country. So I think we need to be very, very inventive in this. And just a point on the regulatory part that you mentioned, right? I don't think, I'm not in favor of saying that you should be on the right side of regulation every time. Regulation will evolve. You need to be right side whether you can make this work. If you can execute it, I think the regulatory framework will evolve, and we can solve that problem. So you need not be on the right side of the regulation and say I'll be always. Just to give an example, if UPI was a startup, I don't think it would have, with the current construct that they had at the point, would have been on the right side of the regulation. But obviously the regulation also will evolve over a period of time, and looking at the other factors, regulations will fall in line. So that's my only.
I wish I knew you when I was doing my startup. So sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I was saying that I was just trying to think of all the women leaders in fintech, right? And I could quickly think of at least three: Lizzie, Sayali, Upasana. So I think there are enough and more leaders, who are in. So we don't have to force upon inclusion. And now with 377, there are more dimensions to inclusion, right? But I don't think we need to force that upon. I mean, it's entrepreneurship at the end of the day. And as long as we provide a level playing field and open it up, I think, people who are interested are risk takers and stuff, they will come up.
So in our last cohort, we had opened up applications and we included a question. Does your startup have a woman co-founder? And you'll be surprised, actually almost 40% startups had a woman co-founder that applied to us, and we had about 1,500 odd, and Anirudh is out here from my team, so he will know the exact number. 1,500 odd startups had applied. So 40% of them had already got a woman co-founder. So I think that is very encouraging. In our own workplace, if diversity. So our team, in fact, at GeoGen Next, we are 10 people, 5 women, 5 men. So if you can cross that barrier in your workplace, I think you can take it forward into your startup as well. Men have to be more comfortable working for women. When that happens, you will see women being able to build very large enterprises very quickly, right? So all of that will happen. Not that women can't work for women. That's not my point. But I'm saying that that level of diversity will evolve eventually. As far as inclusion is concerned in startups, India is a market where essentially everything has to be affordable, and everything has to be affordable in the sense that there has to be, you should be able to see value for whatever you're paying for, right? And that's the market that we operate in. And selling price has nothing to do with cost price. So the market will pay you whatever the market has to pay you. You have to adjust yourself on the cost side. That is typically how the market is. So as when the startup realizes that, that is how they need to build their business model, that is when you will see more inclusive models and more socially impactful models coming about.
Great, thank you. I think it's time to open.